You are listening to the Sunnybrook Unscripted podcast, where we talk real life, answer hard questions, and take a deeper, practical look at the topics we talk about on a Sunday morning. To learn more about Sunnybrook Church, including our Sunday gathering times and opportunities throughout the week, visit us online at sunnybrookchurch.org. Today, we are talking with Pastor Jeff Mose.
Well, welcome back to the Sunnybrook Unscripted podcast. I'm Lydia Miller here with my dad, Pastor Jeff, covering the topic of parenting. Hopefully you've been able to catch some of the first few episodes. We just did one on dads. So if you're a dad listening and you missed that, I would encourage you to go back and listen because there's some really good foundational stuff in that one. And the one we're going to cover this week is one that I selfishly am most excited about because this is something you actually came and spoke to our small group about parenting. We're all kind of in the young phase of parenting. And this was something that was really life-changing or changing in the way that we all were thinking about parenting. It gave just this incredible framework for whatever season of parenting we were going to be in. So I think for you out there, this one is going to be good because it's going to be able to give you a mindset or a framework for whatever season of parenting you're in, whether you've got really little ones, whether you've got elementary schoolers, middle schoolers, God bless you, we're praying for you, high schoolers, adult kids, whatever that might look like. Hopefully this will give you a good place to start.
Yeah, and I would just say this to everybody. We all feel like we just need some resources and some help. And when I first heard this, it was tremendously helpful for me. Because we always feel as though, especially moms and dads, we don't do a good enough job. I feel that to this day. I look back and go, the things I messed up, how I wished I had done better. We all feel that. But when I was able to kind of grasp hold of these categories, I thought it helped me in my parenting quite a bit to be able to say, okay, what's the goal at each phase, at each age? And I want to walk you through that today.
All right, so let's start at the youngest age. We'll jump right in because there's a lot to cover. So you've kind of said that it's broken down really into 4 different kind of phases of life. The first one you would group as from ages 0 to 5. What would that phase of parenting be?
If you have kids 0 to 5, I want you to hear me on this. Your whole goal is to get control of your children. So we often call this the discipline phase. In fact, I'm convinced if by 5 years of age you do this right, you could sort of be done with discipline, so to speak. Now, whatever form of discipline you choose to use, I'm not going to get involved in that debate. But I would say this, your whole goal, because you're sort of readying yourself for the next phase, is you as a mom and dad have to get control. Get your kids to respect, get your kids to honor you, get your kids to obey you, to listen to you. We used to call it first-time obedience, meaning, in a sense, when I say something, the first time I say it, my kids are going to obey. You know, and I started this way too. I was kind of that threatening, bribing parent, and I've seen a zillion of them where you go, you know, when you watch from the outside, you go, stop it. You're not going to follow through, so don't even say it. But we always say in that first phase, their responsibility is to come to that point when you say something, they obey you. And if you got to count to 3, we used to always say, listen, whatever you're going to do on 3, do it on 1. Because all it takes is a little bit of time to teach your children when mom speaks, dad speaks, I need to obey. And I often say this to young parents, it could be life-threatening if they don't. Because if I say to kids, you're close to the road, hey, stop, and they don't obey me, they don't listen, it's very possible they could get hit by a car. So this is a health and safety issue as well, but you want to bring your kids to first-time obedience. So phase 0 to 5 is this. I want to gain control through discipline. So whatever I tell them to do, I want to be able to follow through. I use this line all the time on my kids when they were little. Say what I mean and mean what I say. So if you don't mean it, don't say it. If you say, listen, we're going to go to bed in 5 minutes, and you didn't mean it, don't say it, because all you're doing is training your kids not to obey you. So when 5 minutes is up, it is hard.
I've caught myself many times, because when you talked about this, I've tried to be better about, okay, whatever they can do on 5, they can do on 1. So don't count for them. Mean it when you say it. But there are times, I think, like when you're just trying to like prep them for bedtime, it's like, all right, we're going to go to bed soon. We're going to go to bed. And then it's like, okay, hold on. Do I actually mean that? Is that actually going to happen? Because otherwise it's just noise.
I agree. And I'm telling you, I remember it. You're tired, you're exhausted. But I think parenting is hard work.
Yep.
And again, what I want you to see in these phases is every phase is built on the one that comes before it.
Yep.
So here's what I'd say to you parents who have 0 to 5. If you can't get control, you will never be able to move to the next phase of parenting because they're built on each other. So don't be lazy, don't be tired, don't say things. I used to watch a guy who did it all the time. He would follow, don't do that. Oh, okay, she did that. Don't do that. And he just, he never meant it. And eventually a child goes, listen, there's no reason to listen. They're not going to follow through.
Yep.
They don't mean it.
Yep.
And it's really not that hard to train your kids. I think it could be done in a day, maybe
Yep.
2 days
Yep.
of teaching your kids to obey you the first time. If you just made a decision today, I'm going to follow through.
Yep. I remember Trent and I can tell an embarrassing story about Trent. I haven't done that yet. We had driven from, we were driving to Michigan. We had driven about 9 hours of it, and Leo wasn't listening. He wouldn't stop crying. And Trent said to him, if you don't stop crying, we're going to turn around and we're not going to Michigan. And I was like, there's no way you're going to follow through on that. You can't say that. You have to threaten something that you can actually do.
I agree. In fact, I remember, and this is how much these stories stick out for me, but there were times when you were little kids, if we took you to the grocery store and you were horrible, we literally put you back in the car and went home. If we said, hey, we're going to get some ice cream or something like that,
Yep.
and you have to be able to say, listen, if this behavior doesn't stop, then there are consequences, and
Yep.
then you better be ready to
Yep.
give the consequence. If you're not, just don't say it.
Right.
Because you're training your kids to disobey.
Yeah. And that's inconvenient sometimes.
It's incredible. Parenting is incredibly inconvenient.
But I think that's part because in the next phase, you kind of broke it down to ages 6 through 12. I would imagine it's much harder to reverse that if you haven't done that when you get to that age, because
Correct.
that's a different phase.
Right, because once you have discipline or first-time obedience, now you can move to what I would call sort of the training phase. And the training phase, just to use the sports analogy, is now I'm running plays, we're doing practice, and you're dribbling, and you're learning to shoot and those kind of things. Because at age 6 to 12, they're not really in the game of life, so to speak.
Yep.
You are still kind of the ultimate authority in their life. You can take them, move them, pick them up, all of those kinds of things. So now, when you're in this training, and your mom was really good at this, hey, when we get to so-and-so's house, here's how I expect you to behave. When somebody says hi to you, you say hi back. When somebody gives you something, you say thank you.
Yep.
So you're kind of in that training phase. And if it didn't go well at the people's house, now you get back in the car and go, hey, this is something we talked about. We talked about the fact that when somebody gave you something, you were supposed to say thank you. You were supposed to exchange a courtesy, and you didn't. So you're not really in the game of life yet. You're kind of running drills and practices. You're teaching your kids. And again, biblical ethics is always other-centered. So I'm trying to say, why do I need to exchange courtesies? Because it makes the other person feel loved and cared for. Why do I need to say thank you? Because somebody did something nice for you and you want them to know it. So I'm always looking from an other perspective, and I'm trying to sort of, once you've gotten control, now to begin to train them, sort of run drills and practice, because they're coming toward the point that they're going to be in the game of life. They're not yet, but they're coming toward that, and so I want to do as much training I can.
I think this is an age too where I've seen so many parents really nail this when it comes to like serving in the church or missions sort of things, because I feel like it's an age where kids are really excited about that kind of thing and they can develop passions of themselves. And I've seen parents that really intentionally train them to have an others-focused worldview and to care about what's happening in the world around them.
Very much so. And I think mission experiences are good opportunities, and service things are good opportunities, but then it's got to come into everyday life as well,
Yep. All right, so you've done the training phase. This next phase is probably the one that I think maybe is most difficult for parents, especially if maybe you didn't do as well on the earlier phases. It's years 13 through 18 would be a different phase.
Correct. And we often call this kind of the coaching phase, where, in the discipline phase, I was able to get control, gain their respect, and they obeyed me. Now I'm training, I'm, running practices and drills, but now I'm actually in the coaching phase, because age 13 to 19, recognize now kids are in the game of life. You are not the most important person anymore. Now it's peers and how they are viewed among their kids. So I don't have the ability anymore when they're 13 to 18 to be able to sort of, be the primary influence in their lives.
Yep.
I can call time out every now and then, and we can go, hey, what happened here was not good, and I can coach into it.
Yep.
But the reality is they're sort of running their own plays, doing their own thing.
You're not dropping them off at their friend's house anymore.
You're
not present at every gathering. Yep.
And again, it's built on, did I get control of my kids? Was I able to discipline them and they were able to trust and obey me? Then was I able to kind of train them and run practices and drills and those kinds of things? Because now they're in the game of life, and now they're kind of doing their own thing, setting their own course. Again, after a bad event, I can call time out and we can coach through that, but they're back at it. And so we just have to recognize that those things are built upon each other. And then you come to the last phase, and we call this the friendship phase. And when you guys turned 18, it really was the joy to not have to discipline, to not have to train, to not have to coach. And the only reason I felt good about that was because we had done those three things. And now you come to the point of friendship. Your kid is actually turned out to be some of your closest people. I've said to you before, there's nobody I'd rather hang out with on a day than my own kids. So, they've turned out to be just good people that I love and I care for. And now you move to this friendship phase where, I don't have to, so to speak, you'll always be their parent, but I don't have to sort of speak into their life unless they invite me to do so. And you try to be real careful in that, to only, speak into adulthood of your kids when you're invited. But I think it's critical to recognize friendship is the goal. It's never the starting point. And I think in today's world, again, my criticism of a younger generation is they want to be buddy-buddy at an early age. They want to be friends, when in reality, that's the goal. That's never the starting point. They're going to have lots of friends in life. They only have one parent, and you need to be that in their life. You're shaping them, molding them for the future. So the goal of parenting is friendship. It's not the starting point.
Yep. What I think is so interesting about this too is I think if you get these stages right, what ends up happening in the friendship phase is then you're sought after to coach your. There's nobody I'd rather get advice from than you, and that you kind of become their compass in life, and they invite you to coach into their life because there's a respect that's been built there.
And I think you feel that as a parent. I think when you get to the point of adulthood and you go, boy, this turned out good. Now there's a sense in which you feel somewhat, hey, this worked well. These are my friends. They are, set in life and doing well. And you also know if you didn't. You feel it. There's a tension. There's a distance. There's all kinds of things. And again, I think at that point in time, you got to go and seek forgiveness and say, listen, Mom, Dad wasn't perfect. Here's where I blew it. And then see if you can go.
So let's talk about that, because I remember when you came and spoke on this, Trent and I kind of looked at each other like, ugh, we got to get them listening on the first time. There's some things we have to adjust. But we were still in that first phase. So we're able to kind of adjust and pivot. Let's talk about the parent who's maybe in the middle school phase, the training stage, the coaching phase, maybe even the friendship phase, and they're looking back and they're thinking, oh, I've been getting this wrong. Can they adjust course, and how so?
You can. I do think if you get to the training phase and you recognize you didn't discipline your kids, I think you actually got to go back and do that. I don't think you'll ever be able to train a child that you haven't gotten control of. So recognizing I'm giving you categories here, but it could be 0 to 8 is the discipline phase because we didn't do our job like we should have, and now we need to do so. And I'd say the same, coming into teenage years. Now you got to go back and do some training and those kinds of things. But recognize that's very difficult to do. You can probably imagine when you start to run drills and practices for a teenager, how well that goes over. Or how when you've got maybe an 8 or a 9-year-old, you're disciplining still. It's not ideal. So. That's why I just say to parents, again, you can go back and you can do correction, but it's so much easier if you do it right during that time.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Is there a resource for parents? I mean, say they've heard on this, they like it, they agree with it. Is there anything that they could read into more and do more with?
There certainly are. Anything that James Dobson has done is very good. Most of Mom and I's training came from a book called Growing Kids God's Way. And I just think it's good stuff, and it's worth getting a hold of. I don't know how much of it's still available. I'm so old now that maybe is not available, but those kinds of things are really good resources.
Well, I just would encourage you parents kind of in that exhausting stage of disciplined parenting myself to stay the course and continue a good work in your kids, because they really are not ours. They are a gift from God that has been entrusted to us. So just saying a special prayer over you this week. Make sure you join us next week. We're going to continue on this important topic of parenting.
If you are encouraged by today's talk, be sure to rate us and hit subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcasts. To experience other talks, videos, and live gatherings, visit us online at sunnybrookchurch.org or download the Sunnybrook Church app. And again, thanks for listening to the Sunnybrook Community Church podcast.